your last event? I have more. One more?
Tomorrow I'm doing a civic journey.
Who's Heather? Is she here already?
She's in a taxi, but she's been delayed.
You know the Joyce.
She's in the back. Yeah, she's coming. She's in the back.
Buonasera. Good evening, buonasera. Benvenuti, questo per non essere, siamo molto felici di vedere, you have your earphones, yes, okay. Di vedere tanta gente in questa sala, benvenuti. Questo, tanto perché non vi sbagliate, è la tavola rotonda su Kony2012. Io sono Mario Tedeschini Lalli, mi è stato chiesto di moderare questo incontro. Per chi i nostri ospiti parleranno in inglese, per chi ha bisogno di traduzione ci sono le cuffie che possono essere, credo, ritirate subito fuori dalla porta. Io, nella misura del possibile, invece sarò l'unico speaker in lingua italiana. Due rapide parole. Stiamo parlando qui di questo fenomeno molto recente, di questo video, Kony2012, prodotto da questa organizzazione no profit Invisible Children, e che ha avuto una diffusione rapidissima in rete attraverso, non soltanto, ma attraverso in gran parte i social media, e che ha suscitato sin dal primo giorno molto interesse sia per i significati, diciamo, relativi ai media e anche al giornalismo che questo può aver portato, sia per quanto riguarda anche diciamo, lo scopo politico che voleva avere, nel senso che questo video è stato prodotto da un'organizzazione che aveva uno scopo politico, che era quello di concentrare l'attenzione del mondo e in particolare degli Stati Uniti sulla figura di questo personaggio, Joseph Kony. Prima di dare la parola ai nostri ospiti, vorrei fare un piccolo sondaggio. Quanti delle persone in sala hanno visto il video? Alzano la mano, grazie. Hanno visto il video di cui stiamo parlando? Grazie, giù le mani. Chi non ha visto il video? Grazie, alza la mano. Di quelli che hanno visto il video, quanti lo hanno visto? Stiamo proprio per cercare di capire, non è che vogliamo discutere di questo. Lo hanno visto fino in fondo perché era un video molto lungo. Quanti hanno, giù le mani, grazie, quanti invece lo hanno visto, però poi a un certo punto, dopo 2 minuti, 5 minuti, 10 minuti, 20 minuti, hanno smesso. Alzano le mani, grazie. Ok, grazie. Quanti hanno risposto all'appello, diciamo, di attività, hanno sottoscritto, hanno chiesto il kit che veniva offerto o hanno offerto del denaro, diciamo, hanno fatto un'azione diciamo, in positivo di risposta a questo video. Chiedo scusa? No, adesso poi lo possiamo anche chiedere, ma insomma no, non vale il mi piace su Facebook. La domanda era se valeva il I like it su Facebook. No, parlo di un'azione tipo appunto dare del denaro, insomma partecipare in maniera attiva. E quanti hanno partecipato in parte o totalmente alla giornata di mobilitazione del 20 aprile che era prevista da questo schema? Grazie, mi sembra che sia una cosa interessante, che sia, come dicono i nostri amici anglofoni, food for thought, e io credo che ciascuno di loro può avere appunto, un punto di vista particolare su questa cosa. Le domande che si sono poste sono state di natura varia. Prima di tutto io sono un giornalista, e sono un giornalista anziano, come vedete dai miei capelli, e mi sono occupato a lungo di affari internazionali, e molti dei miei colleghi si sono anche un po' adirati perché hanno pensato: ma come? Noi per anni siamo andati in Africa, abbiamo scritto, abbiamo cercato di convincere i nostri capi redattori, poi alla fine abbiamo pubblicato qualche cosa. Questi fanno un video di mezz'ora e 100 milioni di persone lo vedono e raccolgono una quantità di denaro molto alta. Ma allora noi non serviamo a niente? Oppure dobbiamo fare tutto diverso? E questa era la domanda, diciamo, dei giornalisti, specialmente dei giornalisti tradizionali. C'è stata poi una domanda, delle polemiche di natura, chiamiamola, più politica. Ci sono state organizzazioni che hanno criticato l'organizzazione che ha prodotto questo film, sostenendo due cose sostanzialmente. Uno, che non era completamente, le informazioni che davano erano parziali e non completamente, non davano il quadro completo della situazione. O che era troppo emotivo. Altri hanno anche addirittura messo in dubbio gli scopi stessi della mobilitazione. Un terzo livello di questioni è se in fondo questo fenomeno, che è stato da un punto di vista quantitativo assolutamente straordinario, tanto che siamo qui a parlarne questa sera e la stragrande maggioranza di voi comunque lo ha visto e ne ha sentito parlare, se alla fine questa è una cosa che può funzionare magari meglio in situazioni analoghe, oppure può creare più problemi di quanti non ne voglia risolvere. Io chiedo ai nostri ospiti di prendere, specialmente all'inizio della discussione, ciascuno il tema che lo stimola di più e vediamo poi di andare avanti insieme. Alla fine del giro di opinioni naturalmente ci sarà il tempo di porre qualche domanda. Abbiamo deciso così, nelle segrete stanze di seguire lo stesso ordine alfabetico con il quale i nostri ospiti sono indicati nel programma, e quindi do la parola a Charlie Beckett, che è direttore di Polis, il centro per lo studio dei media e del giornalismo della London School of Economics, che è qui alla mia sinistra. Charlie, you should turn on your mic.
Good evening, everybody. Why are you here and not out eating and drinking? Why am I here? I think it just shows how fascinating a topic this is, partly because, like you said, the reaction to this video. One of my very good friends, Lindsay Hilsum, who's the international editor at Channel 4 News, wrote a blog saying, this video might have been inaccurate, it might have been a bit glitzy, but wow, she has been reporting on Africa and the Lord's Resistance Army for 20, 30 years now, and has never been able to get that kind of attention. And my other friends who work in NGOs, like Oxfam or and so on, again, they were spellbound by somebody who managed to get people like you, so many of you, who watched a 30-minute video about a human rights abuse issue in Africa. And that's quite extraordinary. This is a video that was even more popular, even more quickly than Susan Boyle singing on Britain's Got Talent. So it absolutely required, I think, people to pay attention to how it happened, what impact it might have, and what does it signify. So that's why I was interested in it, as somebody who does a lot of work looking at journalism online and the impact of social media, but especially in the context of issues like this, of global issues around human rights and suffering and so on. And, like everyone else, my first reaction was a kind of wow reaction. But very rapidly, I found myself being incredibly angry about what had happened. And this wasn't particularly to do with the 5-year-old boy. It wasn't particularly to do with the kind of Hollywood production values. It wasn't even to do with the kind of wonderful, uplifting, evangelical spirit of the video. My problem is, and I'm going to try and be quite quick about this so that we can get on with the debate, but I had 3 main problems which you've alluded to. The first one was that I thought that it was inaccurate, and I don't mean by that that it was, that the facts were wrong, although some of them were wrong, but that it was utterly misleading as an analysis of Kony himself, or Kony, as you're supposed to say, and secondly, completely misleading about how that particular problem itself might be solved. Indeed, I think all the evidence is that, generally speaking, when you work with disreputable African governments and you bring in American military, things do not tend to work out very well, not even in the short term, but let alone in the long term. I was also very angry, critical about the means that were being used. So I was critical about the ends that were intended, but I was also critical about the means that were being used. As I say, not because of the simplification. I spent 20 years as a journalist simplifying things. I understand that. But I thought that the purpose of this video, if you look at it, was actually to get you to network. That was its only aim, really. It wasn't really seeking to educate. It wasn't really seeking to get you to be committed to a cause in any meaningful way. The money, again, I'm not really criticizing it for that, although that, is a bit dubious, the amount of money they've spent. But what they were interested in was this thesis that if by raising awareness in the short term, you could force politicians to act. And if you look at my blog, I analysed the way it did that. And I thought that focus on the means and the mechanism was a hollow act and manipulative. But I was also, my critique is also that we've talked about this as if it was a miracle of social media, of the internet, that this was a sort of magic of clicktivism. And now I'm very much somebody who is, how can I put this, in a skeptical kind of way. I think there's a lot of evidence that social media is being used by people in lots of different ways to try and empower themselves, to try and challenge authority and so on. I think there's a lot of evidence that stuff is happening like that. But this one, strangely, when you look closely at it, it wasn't terribly miraculous. what they had done, and they had done it brilliantly through the film, was to get people, they started off by working offline. They'd been working for years. These are not overnight people. They've been working for a long time to build a network of people who you see on the video, don't you? You see them in that lovely way with the red T-shirts, you know, doing a kind of Nuremberg rally, but to pop music. And they've been working very hard on that community of people around campuses and around churches, mainly around Southern America. And the evidence is that when this video took off, it was very much that audience that was propelling it. And the genius of it was to get them to focus on activating other influential people online, such as celebrities. And of course, the critical moment was when Oprah Winfrey retweeted it, and it turned from around 60,000 in traffic, I think within an hour or so, to about 6 million. And that was the sort of catalyst that then propelled it. And I think in that sense, that is an impressive trick if you're interested in internet marketing, but when you market around human rights and when you market around politics, and I would argue around journalism, you're looking for something sustainable. You're looking to create something that has a kind of validity. And I think that in this case, it wasn't. It's interesting just from this selection that you were doing earlier, how few people converted. Now, of course, invisible children don't really care. As long as 1% of 100 million people give money, then they are very rich and they can do the things they want to do in terms of further publicity in their campaigning. You know, if only 1% of people get involved, that's still a lot of people. But what I was questioning, and I'm very cynical about, is what happens afterwards? What happens to those people when Kony is not captured? And he will not be captured. And if he does, it will, I don't think he will, in this year, then I think it will be done in such a cack-handed, can you say, what's in Italian for cack-handed? A clumsy way, that I think it will actually have a negative consequence in the region itself. But I'm also interested in what negative consequence it might have for all those people who clicked on this, who expressed their support, and then it fails. How do you go back to those people when you have a more responsible project, when you have a more sustainable project, and ask them to try again? So for all those reasons, I think that it was hugely impressive, very, very interesting, and should not be taken as a negative case study that proves that all online activism is somehow wrong or negative or dangerous. But I think it reminds us that millions of clicks in traffic does not necessarily amount to real change.
Grazie. Oh, è anche possibile applaudire. Martin Dawes alla mia destra, è stato giornalista a lungo e adesso lavora con l'UNICEF. In particolare si occupa di Africa per l'UNICEF. Credo che forse a lui possiamo chiedere what after, anche come una delle domande che si è posta Charlie, ma in genere appunto il mondo del non profit, che cosa trae da queste, che lezioni trae da questo, che problemi o che invece lezioni positive trae da queste esperienze. L'UNICEF, come sappiamo, è l'organizzazione delle Nazioni Unite che si occupa in particolare dell'infanzia e quindi diciamo, potrebbe avere qualcosa da dire in proposito.
Okay, and is relevant for this conversation that before I joined UNICEF, I was the BBC's East Africa correspondent. So Kony and his dreadful doings and what happened in northern Uganda was part of my work, and I too struggled to get it on the air. And I can remember growing up listening to people talking about Kony's, I think it's his aunt called Alice Aquina, who used to lead children against the Ugandan army of that time and told them that if they throw rocks at the soldiers, the rocks will become grenades. And of course, these kids were just brutally shot down on that. So this is a long-standing issue. It's not a quick fix. It's about the whole issues in northern Uganda. I'm not quite as negative as to what might happen about Kony. I hope he'll be captured. Today we had the news about Charles Taylor. I'm from West Africa. We saw the consequences of Sierra Leone and Liberia. If there is any journalist today who would like a politically correct UN quote, I think it's great that he was done. I think it's very good indeed, because it's proper justice, it's methodical justice, we learn more through the process, and it also sends a message to the remaining Kones and the possible Charles Taylors in Africa. So what do we learn from this exercise that has been going on? Of course we're fascinated. We have a crisis going on at the moment in the Sahel, and we're desperately trying to get attention. I would think what would I give to get the attention that the Kony video managed to achieve? I would do something quite exciting, I think. There's institutional reasons why we can't, like facts and responsibility. I loved many aspects of the video. It irritated me. I'm the wrong age group, actually. I had tremendous inquiries. As a spokesperson, my name is publicly available, from people my age saying, my teenagers are talking about this guy. And it hit that level, and that, I think, was extremely interesting. And the people I know who then went away, these teenagers who went away and learnt more, came back and said, oh, the video's no good. It was extremely interesting that they saw it, they were motivated, how could this be happening? And then they learned a bit more about it and said, well, actually, I think it's wrong. It's not happening in Uganda. It's actually happening in the Central African Republic. He's been driven out. So I don't really like misleading information. I have a job with it. I don't think we can simply say something gets results and we don't really mind how that happens. I personally can't. That's one issue. We had several journalists who we had sold our right arms to go to the Sahel. And they said, sorry, we've got to go to Uganda and do Kony. Because News Desk can only do one African story a month, apparently. And the capacity to do one or two others. And the expense, actually. But it's extremely so other things, there are other consequences. These things do, these consequences, these decisions, one drive on one aspect has consequences for other things. If that's how news organizations are going to have to operate. And we have sympathy. There is money issues. Africa's an incredibly expensive place to work. What does this mean for non-profits? As I said, we're extremely jealous of the attention. Let's be clear about that. I mean, it's just wow. There are lessons for us. I think any UN organization is probably the wrong generation to do this properly. I mean, you almost want to say, let's form a new division. Let's put 11-year-olds in it and let's give them computers and walk away. Because they might actually make a difference and, we'd profit, but we wouldn't necessarily like what was being said. That's one possibility. It's worth thinking about. We are trying. I mean, and we have the figures. On the Sahel, we're doing a very big campaign, been going on 2 to 3 weeks, actually using social media. It's a bit like watching your aunt in a disco. But we're trying. Gender unfortunate comment as well from a UN spokesman. But the interesting thing is that it clearly works. We have the records of what happened before and before afterwards. We have tracked our use of language, whether language is picked up. The week before April the 3rd, nada, nil point. Après, loads. Big comment. Big social media engagement, and more importantly also traditional media engagement on the Sahel. Still not breaking through, still not getting there, but from our points of view, an interesting exercise which we are still running. So, finally I would say about the video, and I agree with an awful lot of what Charlie already said. I mean, what we have to engage people on and do better is that most of these issues are highly complex. Anyone looking for a quick fix on a 3-generational issue, or the issue about why Africa is poor, well, why Africa is rich but Africans are poor, and sees superficial solutions, is going to come unstuck, frankly. It's years of engagements. You have to be in the countries. It's about understanding the dynamics of what's happening and the culture. And that does not lend itself to snappy solutions and quick, easy...
I like button kind of thing.
I like button. I mean, I do it. But it is. But you know, the whole issue of how to get engagement. The very final thing I would say is that on one of the blogs that I follow, it was absolutely clear from what the writer was saying that this was one of the biggest exercises that liberated and brought out an awful lot of African voices. Because they were mad, they were irritated, and so many more voices were said that normally do not get into issues and are picked up by the people. And as part of the global conversation about the issues that we do not like that end up in The Hague, this is a good thing. So I'll leave it at that.
Grazie. Kevin Doris Adrian, is that how you pronounce your name? She's also a journalist. She's a TV journalist, but she has a very specific experience, a very specific angle on this story. Because as far as we know, she's the last journalist who actually interviewed the man we are talking about. And she's also, I understand you were at the festival here a couple of years ago? Last year, okay. So I suppose you can, as a journalist and as somebody who has been there and done that, what's your reading of this whole thing?
Well, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be in Italy, though I don't speak Italian. It's very difficult for me. The guy, Joseph Kony, actually comes from where I come from. So I'll go straight to talk about just my own point of view about the video itself. I was the first person, like, everybody was calling me to say, did you watch that video? Did you see that video? Because everybody in Uganda know I interviewed him, and for many years, Ugandans, since you've been reporting, Ugandans know that the guy doesn't exist, but they think it's a propaganda. It's like it's government trying to play games. But after my interview also, and coming from there, they think now that the guy exists. And when this video actually came out, it was shocking. And from where I come from, like in northern Uganda, I come from Lira basically, and Kony comes from Gulu, which is just a neighbor to Lira, and we speak the same language. And everybody was forgetting about whatever he has done, the atrocities that he's committed up in the north, and people were returning back home after a long struggle. Being in the camps for 25 years, almost my age. And it was difficult to watch that video and, trying to take people back home and then all of a sudden someone comes out to bring something, you know, it doesn't, I don't know the intention of the invisible children, but basically for us it does not make a lot of sense. It does not speak for our people at all, because they're not the victims, and they, would I say, purification, like the LRA who were back at home were going through purification, like we call it matoput. We are getting them back at home, so we are getting the LRA who killed some of these people back at home, and we are getting back together. We are saying, okay, you're sorry, yes, we understand you, and we are going to get you back at home. And then all of a sudden, these kids, you know, like, I don't know, for people who watch the video, these kids are saying, you know, we don't really want to stay, we want someone to come and kill us, for those who have watched it. And then you have this LRA who has come back from the bush. You know, you've just forgiven the person, you've ate with the person in the same plate, and then the next day you've watched this video. What do you think that person down there is going to think? So for us, the video was completely just, you know, opening up the wound. And I think still in Uganda it's a big problem. Everybody right now is not on their happy faces. Everybody is completely, you know, insane. They're looking at it as if it's, you know, they're laughing at us, or they want us to feel bad again after all this time. And I think for the issue of stopping the rebel, as they say in the video, it's a very good thing, because then the world has come up, like the AU and UN, to hunt for this guy, which they have already started. They have launched recently an operation where the Southern Sudan, Uganda, and Congo are moving now to try and trap this guy. But as in my interview with him when I went to the bush, he said he will never be captured. And he said he would be very popular, which I think has somehow come to pass, because now it seems like many people have viewed him, and he has become an international figure, as he said, that his war is going to be one of the most, you know, well-known war, and is not only going to stop in like half of Africa, is going to move as much as he can. I think it's now coming to pass, because he's been in Uganda, he's been in Sudan, and now it's in Congo. It's still going ahead. And by the time I interviewed him in 2006, he had already abducted girls from Congo, and that was in 2006. And so I don't know how much he has got now, but this is a guy that you talk to him now and you think he's basically saying what he knows, but the next thing is going to do something completely different. And for the video, I think it's completely, for me, that I come from there, I have also suffered the same thing, because like some of my relatives have been captured. As I went to do the interview, I met some of my classmates from Aboka St. Mary's, there when I had the interview. It's completely, really very, I don't think it doesn't give a, for us, it's not a good time. It's not a good time for that video. It's completely not a good time, because it's just opening up the wounds that we had for about 25 years. And I completely is very negative about that video. But on the other side, I am also happy that it is helping right now, because the same problem that we've suffered for 25 years, I think the people in Congo are going to suffer as well, because it's still abducting those girls there and the young soldiers. And if we have time, I have a video of about 2 minutes that you can see who this guy looks like. and some of these things that have been happening up there.
Okay, I think we can finish the first round and then perhaps have your video. Thanks a lot. Qualcuno dell'organizzazione, per piacere, servono diverse bottiglie di acqua, per piacere, qua sul tavolo. Grazie, 2 sono poche. I asked for some more water.
I endorse.
Ok, grazie. Abbiamo con noi Evgeny Morozov, giornalista, scrittore, autore di libri. Eravamo, per così dire, a cena insieme prima, è stata una cena un po' rapida, e discutevamo ma da che parte, che angolo di attacco potevamo prendere su questo argomento, che ce ne sono tanti. Io credo che certamente una delle questioni più importanti non è tanto quali sono i risultati, se ci sono negativi per qualcuno, potrebbero essere positivi per l'organizzazione stessa, eccetera. Ma è questo un modo possibile? Cioè segna una strada per, diciamo, un media activism, diciamo, un modo per mobilitare l'azione politica in questo universo digitale in cui noi viviamo, e specialmente in questo senso è efficace, al di là se poi al di là del fatto se gli obiettivi che si dà poi sono giusti o sono sbagliati.
Sure, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I think I'll focus mostly on the questions of global internet culture and how it relates to the sort of thinking about the future of online activism. I think one of the things I immediately like to highlight is that, to make it a bit more provocative, is that I actually disagree with Charlie's opening remarks, and particularly his framing of it as being a somewhat unique, exceptionalist issue, something of an outlier in campaigns that happen online. I actually think it's a sign of a much deeper and more serious malaise with what's happening now in terms of activism online and offline, but also it fits within a longer tradition, which I'll try to outline very briefly so that you see where I come from. So again, I think one of the key things to keep in mind about what we saw with the Invisible Children campaign, it's that it signifies what I would call a very ambivalent attitude about expertise that you see not just in humanitarian campaigns, but which we actually saw for many years now when it comes to journalism, with bloggers stealing the agenda from journalists and establishing their own issues to talk about, regardless of what the journalists actually thought. Wikipedia doing the same with encyclopedias and traditional sources of knowledge. And now we see the humanitarian industry, if you will, being disrupted in a similar way. And here I think, again, you see that there is no respect for expertise whatsoever. People have the tools, organizations have the tools, they don't really care about the old elites, and they're going to do whatever they want to do, right? And again, this is not just limited to Invisible Children and the campaign to go after Joseph Kony. I would argue you can see similar impulses in WikiLeaks' campaign for transparency, where again there is very little care for expertise, whether it comes from traditional entities like Transparency International. There is very little concern for consequences. There is very rigid belief in what needs to be done. And there is a group of people who suddenly got empowered with technology and new media to act on that belief. Again, it's not unique to Invisible Children. You'll see it in WikiLeaks. You'll see it even more, I would argue, in Anonymous. Now, equally distributed global movement that thinks that they need to save the web, and they act however they want, regardless of what established NGOs like Electronic Frontier Foundation or many of the others think. They have an agenda, and now what's more important, they have the tools to do it. So I think Invisible Children fits within a much broader intellectual tradition that is actually redefining how things are done, but it also redefines how we think about expertise, how we think about unintended consequences, whether we should actually think them through before we start. And again, that's something that I don't see in WikiLeaks, I don't see in Anonymous, and partly I don't see in Invisible Children. Now, as we move on from this sort of postmodernist paradigm, I also would like to highlight that, again, it's not just online that such campaigns are happening. Again, you have to understand that in American campuses, for example, in American universities, it's been a decade since students have been encouraged to buy and wear bracelets to save Darfur. Again, this is not a new phenomenon that you are now asked to like a certain cause on Facebook. It's a transition in how we think about activism, and I personally don't think it's a very useful one. The same you can see with the kind of activism that Bono has been doing, trying to encourage us to buy iPods and in that way to save global poverty. Again, this is not a new approach to solving global problems. It fits within an existing tradition. Now it's done online, but it was as ineffective, I would argue, offline. Again, the only effectiveness such campaigns have usually consists in raising money. This is something that's very easy to do in many contexts, because all you're being asked for is to click on a button, go donate some money, and for some people, they feel very passionate about the cause, and they can give the money, or they can buy the iPod, or they can buy the bracelet. Again, once you want to move them to a different stage of engagement, where the engagement would be a little bit more meaningful, where they would be contributed to do something more, it becomes exponentially more difficult. And we saw that partly, again, with the Invisible Children campaign just last week, when they tried to move this movement from the online space to the streets. And they failed, I think, badly. It didn't happen, again, because it requires much more action and it requires much more commitment than you can usually do just by donating money on the internet. Since no one in this movement really thinks much about the unintended consequences, or any sort of consequences, frankly, we end up with, I think, lots of opportunity costs. We end up with people who may have otherwise contributed, maybe in smaller numbers, to the same cause, but to do it in a more effective manner. And they aren't, because they feel that their contribution to the campaign has already been made once they click the like button, or once they have chosen to buy the kit. So this mental concept, if you will, that a lot of economists have, and it's thinking in terms of opportunity costs, it does not often figure on the agendas of these new types of entities. They think that their approach is the right one, and they're eager to push for it, regardless of what other NGOs are doing, what other causes are out there, and what other more effective means of engagement are available. And I think this is very unfortunate. And again, I'm sorry to push this button again, but it's all about very, I think, low respect for expertise. There is something, and even in the Invisible Children campaign, which you can clearly see they do not really think much about engaging with NGOs who actually have knowledge about Africa, or to engaging with people who have studied it deeply. They have a commitment, they feel passionate about it, they're ready to start. And the web actually gives them the platform to do it. This, I think, is very important to remember. But the bigger point here is that, again, I think you have to understand the Invisible Children campaign as part of a new approach to activism. And it's not, I think, an accident that Invisible Children was actually one of the groups that was initially embraced by the State Department in America a few years ago as the pioneers of online activism. That, you can actually go and trace them and see how they were attending some of the summits and conferences about internet activism and about internet freedom set up by the State Department in America. There is a lot of excitement about what these tools can deliver. Of course, in the State Department's case, unless those platforms disrupt their cables and whatnot, that excitement quickly fades away. But there is genuinely a lot of excitement about what they can deliver. And I think it's not always very healthy, because people put too much faith in what technology and social media here can accomplish. And even established diplomats And people with lots of and tons of experience in the region fail to think about the consequences and then fail to think about how engagement in this cause online might distract people from more effective means of engagement. And I think a lot of people made fun of Malcolm Gladwell last year when he wrote that big article in the New Yorker saying that, well, you know, online very little happens because people have weak ties. And people always pointed to the Arab Spring and said, well, but look at the Arab Spring. I think the Kony campaign actually shows that, you know, in some respect, he was right. We didn't see much come out other than the money raised. We didn't see much come out of it in terms of people going and engaging in real offline action. And we may debate whether this is the right dichotomy between the online and the offline. Those are all valid questions. But again, the key thing for me is that this movement failed to translate into something bigger, larger, that could have tackled those problems in a more effective way, even if it was just 1,000 people instead of 1 million. And this, I think, is something that we need to remember. And particularly, I think thinking more, and I repeat myself here again, but I think this is key, thinking through the opportunity costs and being able to recognize that there are other groups out there, that there are other causes, that there are other agendas. You know, it's some basic sort of humility, which I think a lot of NGOs actually have with regards to each other. Those that have been working in this field, they are often humble and they are willing to collaborate with others. They are willing to recognize that there are different multiple approaches, some of them more effective, some of them less effective. This new type of offshoots, which grow almost independently of the activist culture in which they seek to participate, I think that they are not as humble, in part because they're all very young and very arrogant, but also in part because they actually don't have much interest in staying in those causes long term. I don't think that Invisible Children will be in this business as long as Human Rights Watch has been in this business. Those are quick groups that form and then they dissipate as quick as they get formed. And again, it's, I think, something that we need to think about, how they can become more permanent, should they become more permanent, and whether it's actually healthy that they're posing such a great challenge to organizations that will be in this business for decades to come. And I hope that they will. I hope that they will not create divisions run by 11-year-olds to engage in similar tactics. And I think I'll stop here and we can move on to Q&A.
Grazie. Possiamo forse vedere il video che Kevin, ce l'ha la regia forse? Grazie.
Please.
You know what? Major Yunus Bagada, UPDF liaison officer, the first liaison officer, best meets Juba for Southern Sudan, whole of Southern Sudan.
Personal gini. And we near penny yamit. If you are here with you to write.
What can you get?
You talk to children young.
That was life.
That was life.
Life.
An John ấy chỉ bèo mà tép và phơi cái quẹt đàn nó chẹt đàn mà bây giờ cái gufu bây giờ
Can you give us perhaps a little bit of background to?
Sorry. I just made everything from now, so just to, from the start, it's just when Uganda government and the LRA tried to talk peace, to get Kony to come back. So the peace talks was in Juba, and a guy who was shaking hands and clapping was the president of Southern Sudan, together with the minister representing the government of Uganda and the representative of the LRA, were making peace in Juba, which failed because of Kony's demand of ICC or International Criminal Court being removed, which did not, was not possible. And then the guy that I stood next to is Kony's deputy, which Kony killed in 2007. In my interview, he said he would kill him if he would come against him, and he killed him in 2007. And Kony is the guy who's seated down with the, and he's trying to explain that if Museveni wants peace, he should first let his people go back home, because it's his people that are suffering more than anyone else. So, and the road, you can see that's where we passed through, of course, to go to meet this guy. So just a bit about almost everything, although it's not perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Prima di passare alle domande, chiedo ai miei, io proporrei di fare così, se i nostri ospiti hanno, come dire, qualcosa da aggiungere, avendo sentito anche gli altri, alle cose che hanno detto, possiamo fare un brevissimo round ancora di opinioni e poi passiamo alle domande e poi naturalmente loro risponderanno di nuovo. Allora, passiamo alle domande. Dov'è il microfono? È qui, una è lì. Facciamo 2 o 3 domande insieme e poi un'altra è lì e poi rispondiamo. Sì, forse.
Buonasera. Oh, maybe I should do it in English, right? Because
just the same.
Yeah. My name is Nela Lazarevic. I'm a journalist of Viesti newspaper from Montenegro. I would, if you allow me, I would like to ask a question to the public. The one that I think, if I may say, was missing from the beginning. And it is, how many people in the public knew who Joseph Kony was before seeing the video? And how many people didn't know or still don't know who is Joseph Kony? Please be honest. Did I say it wrong? Oh, okay. So, yeah, okay, thank you. Just that.
Hi, my name is Daniela. I'm from Costa Rica. And my question is for most in the panel. My country defends human rights very much. And Kony movement created craziness in my country. People really went to the streets with signs saying Kony and things. And it really was crazy. Media, because I cover human rights, we phoned invisible children and asked them what they think about what was going in Costa Rica, and they never answered. And they never answered the people who went to the streets in Costa Rica. Imagine this tiny country, 4 million people, and they went to support Uganda. So my question is, how can we make our people believe again and become activists in things that relate to social media if now they went and there was really no answer from invisible children?
Buonasera. No, visto che non... se c'è qualche problema di traduzione oppure posso... Ok. Dato che io ho visto il video tramite un social network, chiedevo a voi, che naturalmente siete più esperti di me e riuscite a comprenderle meglio queste cose, se magari il video non è stato visto più che altro perché come moda, cioè perché andava visto, perché gli altri l'hanno visto, ne parlano di questo, e non conoscerlo, non saperlo, non sapere di cosa parla sarebbe come venir meno a un obbligo non scritto, in cui colui che conosce il video, Kony, tutta la vicenda, sia in qualche modo, diciamo, superiore rispetto agli altri. E magari gli altri l'hanno visto semplicemente per questo e magari non l'hanno visto tutto, dopo 5 minuti hanno staccato, come si è detto, perché non gli interessava veramente in fondo ciò che diceva il video, ma gli interessava vedere il video per non essere tra quelli appunto che non l'avevano visto.
Hi, Bilal Randri with Al Jazeera. I just wanted to say, in response to the first commenter's statement, that that's what Invisible Children set out to do, to make Kony famous. And they did succeed in that front, but the criticism has been, so what, or why? Is it really relevant to have him famous? But I think what it did do, in a positive way for us, it gave us the opportunity to look at what Ugandans were saying. So the video did really well, and we launched a crowdsourcing campaign to get Ugandan voices heard. And it was a SMS campaign through Ushahidi, where people who didn't have access to the internet, who never watched the video, received text messages on their mobile phones. And a lot of people didn't know that there was, the world going mad with this video and there's t-shirts and bands or whatever it is. They had other problems that they did need assistance with or whatever. So that was one way of looking at it. But also it was, and something I think was quite significant, a lot of the people were concerned with, or offended rather, by the idea of trying to make this man famous. There was a screening that was held in northern Uganda, a public screening that we reported on. And people at the screening actually started, it got quite violent in the end. I don't know who caused it or what. But the idea, the criticism was that, to us as Al Jazeera people, would you be happy if somebody came and tried to make Osama bin Laden famous? Because it sheds a very negative light on you or your community in that part of the world that you're based in. So just...
Facciamo un po' di risposte e poi passiamo ad altre domande.
The first two, I think, very easily. So with the question about Costa Rica and that invisible children never got back, well, I think, not to defend invisible children, but I don't think they ever planned for the scale that the campaign eventually attracted, and I don't think that they were actually ready to handle everything. It's, in some sense, they remind me of, there are a lot of startups in Silicon Valley which launch and then they got really famous on day one and then their website crashes and then everyone feels very awkward afterwards because they cannot handle the interest. So in that sense, I think Invisible Children also shows how important it is for such groups and causes to actually think through the contingency scenarios and what do you actually do if you get on CNN and Al Jazeera. And I think they were not actually prepared for that. And again, as Charlie said, they've been in this business since 2005, if not earlier, and they never had such a response. So it's not that I'm defending them, it's just that I think that shows you one of the risks of doing things online and not planning for that your clip will be seen by everyone. With regards to why people watch those videos, whether it's just psychology, whether it's just peer pressure, or people actually trying to impress their peers by showing that they actually care about Uganda, while and Kony, while in fact maybe they don't. I think what you also have to grasp here is that invisible children will probably tell you that they don't care. For them, the motivation behind awareness raising doesn't really matter. As long as people know about Kony and as long as they know about what's happening, whether people do it because they care about the issue, whether they do it because they are playing a game, and there is this huge movement now of gamification where we try to gamify everything, fighting climate change, participating in global causes, or whether it's because they've been paid $1 in virtual currency or, in virtual pets or virtual farms, whatever. It doesn't matter to them. As long as there is awareness, they think that their cause has been accomplished. Now, to criticize that stance, you really need to take a very old-fashioned position and say that, well, maybe those are not the kind of citizens we would like to foster in our society. Maybe we want people to care for the right reasons and not because they're playing a game or because they're impressing their friends or because they're being paid in virtual currency to cultivate their virtual farms, right? It's a very old-fashioned position which no one wants to defend because, hey, you're telling people that there are good and bad reasons to engage in politics, right? And that's not something that resonates with the public that exists in a very postmodern paradigm where they think that everything goes and motivation doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's a bit late for the words postmodern paradigm, isn't it? But I'm very glad that Evgeny, I really like Evgeny's the analogy, the idea that Jason Russell is kind of the new Julian Assange. And I think I'm particularly pleased you mentioned WikiLeaks because, of course, I've just written a book about WikiLeaks, so it's a good opportunity to be able to mention it.
I hope I get a commission.
That's right. But that's right, fundraising. Sadly, this book will not go viral. But I think that the point about WikiLeaks was that, in a way, it was at its most interesting when it did something which Evgeny is suggesting invisible children wouldn't do because they are too arrogant, too stupid, which was the bit when WikiLeaks had its most effect was when it was networking with mainstream media and it was able to access the audiences and the expertise and the authority of mainstream media organizations, and it was able to have some kind of effect. Things went badly wrong afterwards, and I think that's, again, to agree with Evgeny, that there's something innately unstable about that kind of project when it's constituted as purely a networking impact activity, that those who sort of die by that kind of instantaneous, live by that instantaneousness will also die by it. And in that sense, Invisible Children was not able to move on. Now, there's 2 points to be made from here. Firstly, there's going to be a lot more of this. And this is not just about the internet, it's about a whole series of factors about, Evgeny again alluded to the sort of loss of authority amongst traditional organizations, a lack of deference, and much of this is a good thing. That if we are in a world where we are more skeptical, that could be because we are also more intelligent as well. And the internet in that sense doesn't create this, it's the place where some of this happens. And I think that the task for everyone from NGOs to journalists and activists is to think not in the way that Malcolm Gladwell did, that you sort of dismiss the internet as somehow historically a mistake, because it isn't going to go away, that this kind of networkness is still going to be there, and it's more a question of thinking harder about how do you convert weak ties into stronger networks. And one of the facts about this may be that you don't convert 1 million or 100 million clicks into a strong network. It may be that that is just unrealistic. And that is my final point, which is that, because this is about attention. So somebody mentioned, that we knew about Kony. Well, that's good. We have that awareness. But what about the other 100 evil dictators or human rights offenders around the world, in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe? What about those guys? Why aren't we paying attention to them as well? Why have we picked that one person? I think one thing we all have to be more realistic about is that just because the internet can potentially make you all very aware of one thing, that may not be helpful. That if you have to pay attention to something that you may be able to have an impact on sustainably, rather than this idea of this huge kind of digital gold rush towards one specific goal.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to go to the point about Costa Rica, actually. And it goes to some extent about, was it fashionable or whatever, and people wanting to be involved. I mean, I think that the trouble is what we're basically talking about is a situation of complete imbalance. Because I don't think you would have got that video if it had been about China or India. And I think that, you know, there are many ways, actually, to exploit Africa. Africa doesn't have the kickback. So when we say, where are the restraints? I think a lot of the conversations we've been having is, where are the restraints? People can say what they like or do what they like. Well, they won't if there is a very strong force coming back at them. And there is more knowledge about Africa, or there's more knowledge about something else. I mean, we know as NGOs, you know, that there's things that we do in Africa because actually governments are probably weaker. And that you can say they need more support, but in India, it would be like, no. You're not doing that. We do it. And I think that what we're looking at with the Kony thing is that there's a, you know, you could say what you like about a very, very, very bad man in the conditions you've just seen. There isn't a lot of civil society there saying, hey, hold on a second, you got it wrong. And what would be great is if in the future people who are mobilized and activists in Costa Rica or Panama or wherever actually have a reciprocal conversation with our other people who say, what's going on? And that's what I think is a great way that can be used on the network, and that can happen through a lot of the networks that happen. You raise an interest in something and you receive more information back. But as I said earlier, I mean, I don't think the future lies in inaccurate information, basically, or in unbalanced relationships. This actually then goes also to trending, if it's not too late to mention trending. I mean, the trouble is that we also, everyone wants to get on the trend, you know, and crikey, it's popped up from nowhere and we want to get on it, and our news desk want to get on it, and everyone wants to get on that trend, and they're going to send correspondence. And really there has to be pushback there too. There has to be, if journalism, and I speak as a former journalist, if there is knowledge out there, it has to basically say, let's push back. Let's actually inform people, because that goes out too. You know, that, yeah, okay, it's interesting, but, you know, and it's motivated this age group or these people. But where is the good knowledge? You know, the bad shouldn't drive out the good. That's it for me.
Hi, my name is Jess Hill. I'm from the Global Mail, and I'm just interested in a couple of the panelists referred to the apathy of young supporters where all they did was donate to this campaign. Maybe they clicked like, but they donated a bit of money and it never translated into anything more. I used to work as a copywriter for UNICEF, and usually what UNICEF was trying to do was to generate fundraising, was to get supporters. And usually those supporters didn't generate into anything more than people who wrote a $40 check every month. And I'm wondering what's so much more apathetic than to young people who donate than 50 to 60-year-olds who donate to UNICEF because it's a nice blue chip charity that looks good on their tax return. Sorry to be so cynical.
Un'altra domanda che secondo me mancava all'inizio del dibattito era quanti di voi hanno visto il secondo video fatto uscire da Invisible Children il 5 aprile? Ok. Si intitolava Beyond Famous, cioè che cosa ne facciamo di Kony dopo averlo fatto diventare famoso? E nel secondo video lo spiegavano bene, cioè loro chiedono ai governi, agli stati di fare qualcosa, di aiutare i governi della regione centrafricana per catturare quest'uomo, e lo chiede un'organizzazione statunitense. Gli Stati Uniti non sono membro della Corte Penale Internazionale. una domanda infatti che rivolgo soprattutto a Kevin Doris. Cosa ne pensa di questa richiesta dell'intervento armato e che comunque ha avuto successo, perché molti senatori degli Stati Uniti, ma anche l'Unione Europea, il 19 aprile, il giorno prima di Cover the Night, ha fatto uscire un comunicato dicendo: noi appoggiamo le iniziative per fermare l'LRA.
Sì, I don't like this video, but 100 million people can be wrong. So I just tweeted the lesson of this experience is that the content is no more king, but it's a commodity. What do you think about this?
Credo che dobbiamo fermarci qua, scusatemi, però ci sono molte... Dai, proprio una, poi basta. C'era là... no, scusate, allora... chiedo...
Been cynically maligned. Look, I mean, I'm not ashamed about asking for money. It's what we do. We get money, we try and save lives. It's not actually, we don't raise money because we want to put it in a bank account. You know, we have 1 million children in the Sahel needing help now. It works out at $100 per child and we'll save their lives. 95% going in will come out and walk out. 5% is going to be harder. So I'm not, you know, that's what we do. And when we're doing this social media campaign, it isn't just a social media campaign, actually. It is actually a drive to get it into traditional media, to get to the older donors, to bigger donors, and also to attract younger donors. So, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, that's what we do, and we can measure that, and to some extent it works. The issue... one other just final thing I would say is that I sometimes wonder, and I really don't want to sound like a United Nations, you know, patriarchic, that's a big word this time of the evening, but we're looking at like, we're wanting, maybe social media has reduced the time that we want to see results. Results in what we're talking about in development is 2 generations, 3 generations, and people say, well, what's it done now? Charles Taylor ends up being convicted after a 4-year trial, after time as Liberian Prime Minister handing out diamonds to models, and as time when he was a warlord encouraging kids to take up arms. Long cycle, but we have to, one of the questions is, it's not a question like a quick video halfway through might have solved it.
What was the question she has? Because I came late.
Yes, about whether one of the aims of the video and the organization was to get armed intervention in Uganda and Central Africa for Kony, and how do you think?
What was the reaction in Uganda to that idea about basically foreign soldiers coming in to solve the problem?
Okay. Well, well, I think still it brings me back to someone from Algeria about this video that they showed in northern Uganda and brought a fight. Everybody in Uganda thinks it's a joke because all these years where the invisible children has been in northern Uganda for a very long time. And all these governments have been, you know, you've been around for many years. And representatives of different countries have been in northern Uganda, and they didn't do anything. It was just Ugandan government, you know, trying to look for Kony, fighting Kony, until they decided to, you know, send them to Southern Sudan to all the peace talks. That's how the rebels left Uganda. So all these times, where were the army? I think the AU, I would say, sorry, UNICEF, I mean not UNICEF, but UN, sorry, they're very, I think the AU and the UN are, I would say, and America are ashamed of themselves because now they're coming up after all these atrocities that has been happening in northern Uganda. You know, people like my age mates have not gone to school, you know. They have lost relatives. And we just see, first of all, the video, for me, it's crap. I think it's just something that is annoying. And then secondly, everybody coming now, it's just doesn't make a lot of sense for us as Ugandans. But we are happy that it's going to help Congo. Maybe they're much happy to do that. But I think all this time, Uganda fought its own war, and Americans were, you know, they have been there for a long time. And they launched operation, they call it Operation Thunder, that was in 2008 to trap Kony. But since that time up to now, Kony is not, and I don't think this year by any means is going to be captured, so.
Grazie. E forse l'ultima cosa, un momento ancora, the question, can 100 people be wrong?
Can I still want to answer that.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I think there is nothing wrong. Yeah, I think there is nothing wrong in trying to go and fundraise online. There is nothing wrong in trying to go and establish the like button as your main objective in your campaign. All of that needs to be driven by context and by the goals of the campaign that you're working on. My suspicion is that in many campaigns that are similar to the one that Invisible Children held, their focus on fundraising is not a result of some thought through, very complex process of trying to come up with a strategy and evaluating what are the best means of achieving that strategy. It's just a product of the very poor imagination. They cannot think about what else is there to do beyond just raising money or getting the like button. The problem is that in many contexts, money is not going to solve the problem. I come from Belarus. You can go and raise as much money as you want on Facebook. You're not going to change the government. Money is not the problem. Money comes from European Union, US, opposition has drowned in money. It's not the money that's the problem. You have to go and think of other ways of engagement. And if you're not willing to think of other ways of engagement and you do those things only because the platform allows you to, then you're just not using the platform to the full possible extent.
And as it happens, just to reply to you, because no one actually used the word apathy. I don't know if you noticed. Nobody actually used it. The point was almost the opposite, that there was this actual enthusiasm and that it, may be dissipated. But what would agree with you is I think there is more of a serious challenge here. In a similar way, funnily enough, that, if you like, WikiLeaks, remember, there's a new book, that WikiLeaks, in the same way that WikiLeaks, whatever you think about it as an entity in itself, it was certainly a challenge to journalism. So journalism was left thinking, crumbs, why didn't we do that? Why didn't we expose this stuff? Why didn't we use the internet like that? And I think there is actually a much more profound challenge, and I think Evgeny has kind of alluded to it, although I think he still would like the NGOs to recover authority. I'm not
scientists. Again, you should not just think about it as NGOs. It's a profound crisis in how we deal with knowledge. Because you like to cherry pick. Why not think about scientists and climate change? There's profound skepticism about knowledge there. It's not just limited to NGOs, and that's why I use the term postmodernist paradigm. It is part of a shift of how we think about knowledge, authority, and expertise.
Yeah, no problem with that at all. And I think it's how you respond. Is how you respond to that. And I'm especially thinking about the media context of the presence of social media, the presence of the internet and digital communications. If you respond to that by a desire somehow merely to instrumentalize this media in the same relationships, many of them, beneficent and marvelous, such as work by NGOs to try and, solve health problems and so on, I think that first of all, you simply replicate failures of the past, but you also miss out on the opportunities that some of these networks at least represent, purely in a mediation sense. So, and this has nothing to do with somehow compromising ideas of intellectual authority or scientificism or anything like that. Quite the opposite. It could actually be a way of having genuine engagement, especially about the key thing which does make a difference. And here I would cite the famous Barack Obama case. You know, he used the social internet. How did he use it? To raise a shed load of money, but for a political purpose. Now, whatever you think about what happened with Barack Obama, he did that for a political purpose, an offline purpose, because he wanted to shape a machine, to change a machine, whatever, use the machine, a political machine for real political change. And I think that is the interesting piece of this, is to think about how do you do similar things. And I'm not sure, frankly, that many NGOs yet have really thought about how that might change their relationship with donor publics and with the people they actually work with.
Except for UNICEF.
Except UNICEF.
Bene, io nel ringraziare, però prima vorrei ancora dire una cosa io, a parte ringraziare ovviamente i nostri amici che ci hanno aiutato con la traduzione, che non è stato molto facile. C'è un'informazione che ho ricevuto e che Evgeny, mi sbaglio o è il momento del tuo compleanno?
It is tomorrow, yes. I'm 12.
Okay. Oh, wow!
Thank you so much.
Molti auguri si dice in italiano. Auguri.
Yes. I hope I don't have to do it all. Now we have to do it. Now you can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice chair.
It went smoothly.
Thank you.